So happy Sunday to you. Let me go ahead and make sure I am recording. I will get going, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So I want to again say for the podcast, I am going live here and recording just a little bit online. So this is a live recording of social media live that is being captured for the podcast. So you do have an opportunity towards the end of this live to ask questions. I am live on multiple social media channels at once, so bear with me as I try to navigate all that. I'm Dr. Tiffany, and I am sharing today because I realize that clarity is something that people need when it comes to messaging. And I was talking to my husband, and he said, you know, you post and your team posts and you talk about these different ideas, and there's brain boosters and there's brain blockers, and does anybody understand what that means? He says, because I don't always understand what you're talking about. And I said, well, that's a really good point. You know, maybe there's an opportunity for more clarity, and as people engage with my content and engage with me online, because I'm so used to these past few years really just engaging with my practice directly, I don't know if people always understand holistically where I'm coming from. So this is just me hopping on and providing some clarity around where I am coming from. And I want to share that what I do, the position that I take, is that of an alternative or maybe even a complement to Western psychiatric healing medication. Okay, so I am positioned as someone that people will go to when they specifically have something going on psychologically. They do not want to immediately jump into a traditional therapy, traditional psychiatric medication intervention, and or my typical patient client in my practice has done years of traditional therapy and psychiatric medication or some sort of healing medication. That is my typical, like my ideal client patient is someone who says, you know, I am now 25, 35, 45, 55 years old, and I have done medications and I have done therapy for a long time, and I am still suffering from fill in the blank. I'm still anxious. I'm still unfocused. I'm still foggy brained. I'm still having memory problems. I still feel overwhelmed. Nothing seems to be giving me the resolution that I had hoped for. And they just keep adding medications. I just keep seeing different therapists. There is no cohesiveness to the treatment that I'm receiving. No one talks to anyone else. And on top of that, many of the people who come to me nowadays are also dealing with, they already know when they come in the door that they're dealing with a chronic illness. So I'll have a number of autoimmune issues that come in the door with this mood focus issue on board as well. Okay, so that's who I am. When I talk about brain blocks, when I talk about brain boosters, when I talk about recovering the brain and healing the brain and getting it back to the place it should have been in, I am talking about an alternative, maybe a complement, probably an alternative, though I'm not villainizing Western medicine, but an alternative to Western medicine approaches. So instead of you getting a pill for every ill, and instead of just sitting in someone's office and just doing talk therapy and processing the latest dramatic event in your life that week, okay, what I am proposing is looking at holistically healing what ails you. I am proposing my method that I have come up with for a variety of reasons for treatment. Okay, and so then people come to me wanting that. So when I say that brain blocker, I'm talking about things that would block your ability to heal your brain. Okay, because I see, and this is very important, I could have almost started with this, I see mental health as brain health. I see mental health as brain health. So you're not going to have the mental health that you desire if you don't have good brain health, right? So then if we need good brain health, you're going to need to know what boosts good brain health. If you need to have good brain health, to have good mental health, you're going to need to know what blocks brain health, right? So then there are brain health boosters and there are brain health blockers. Okay. And so in my head, that makes total sense. But I realized I needed to continue to come back to this idea of clarity and who am I? What is it that I'm doing? And why should you care? Okay. And so if you say, yeah, you know what? I have been foggy brain, unfocused, fatigued, feeling overwhelmed, unable to remember anything, and this has been going on for years, and I've been on Adderall, and I've seen every psychiatrist, and I've seen every therapist, or I've been on Wellbutrin, or I've been on you know, gosh, Valium. I've been on everything, and I'm not getting better, and I'm kind of stuck in this loop of meeting with all these clinicians. And you know what? I really didn't want to do all these medications in the first place, and I do not want to spend the rest of my life in therapy, right? Dependent on the therapeutic process to make sense of what goes on in my life. If you're like, that is not what I want, then that is what I do. That is what I do. Okay. And I'm going to be honest, I was my first client patient. I was my first client patient, and I actually have one of my podcast episodes that tells my story. I won't get into it deeply, but I was one of the first people I tried all these different things on. And then, you know, my husband was one of my guinea pigs as well, you know. And when I say that, I mean that very teasingly, like out of desperation, I went a different route for myself and for him. You know, very early on in my life, I had mental health struggles. And early on at 11 years old, 12 years old, I started having struggles with suicidal ideation. And I would struggle with mood issues and struggle with executive function challenges. And I would be, you know, very highly gifted in specific ways and seemingly well adjusted and seemingly talented in very specific ways. But at the same time, struggled with my mood, struggled with my focus. And this would continue. This would be a continued theme until my early 20s with my mood. Up and down with, you know, bouts of depression and bouts of just not wanting to be here anymore, and even having a plan for how I wasn't going to be here anymore. And it was a business mentor of mine. I told this story a lot. Again, this is on the podcast. A business mentor of mine, a close friend basically of mine, that said, you know what? I really wish someone had told you about the healing benefits of nature and food and exercise and herbals and all those things, and how candida affects your brain and infections change things. I wish someone had told you about that, but I'm here to tell you about those things. And what if instead of going to someone to get on a medication, and what if instead of continuing to suffer with these bouts of depression and anxiety, what if we tried something natural? And what a blessing it was for me in my 20s to be introduced to alternative medicine, right? Which now, you know, as I practice it, is functional medicine and naturopathic medicine. What a blessing that was for me to learn about that in my early 20s. Right? And I swear that saved my life. that saved my life. And when you talk about becoming convicted, like every business I've started has been a result of wanting to build on this and build on this and build on this. That is what has happened for me, whether it was in fitness and then eventually having my mental health practice. And as I have had my journey with mental health and put depression and suicidal ideation in the rearview mirror, I have continued to be blessed to work with people and then to develop in my own programs ways for people to learn the same things that I learned when I was in my early 20s. That there is a lot that goes on that blocks brain health, which then impacts mental health, right? Blocks brain health, which then impacts mental health. Because if you do not have a healthy brain, it is very hard to have healthy mental health, right? And so that's my orientation. So when I'm talking about a brain block and I'm talking about a brain booster, I want you to understand where I'm coming from. And so I developed, and everyone, you know, you hear about this if you've been following me, I developed this model of looking at psychological, physiological, and neurological. Because what I found is, present company included, you know, my husband, my client patients in my practice, people had issues in these three legs of this stool. So maybe they would have had tons of really good talk therapy, but no one addressed the fact that there was a physiological block. Or maybe they had great talk therapy and they had a functional medicine naturopathic workup, but they didn't have a neurological workup. And so they had a block there. Right? And so always they would come to me suffering, saying either they'd done some things, they'd done occupational therapy, they'd done speech therapy, they'd seen a neurologist, or they had a rheumatologist, or they had a PCP or psychiatrist, or they had this great therapist. They had done something, but their stool continued to be wobbly. They couldn't get the healing that they so desired to have, right? And so what was going wrong? So on May 12th at 12:30, I have a workshop coming up talking about the 3 blocks to brain healing, right? And how you can go about healing your brain. And I dive deeper into the blocks and overcoming them. And so you have the brain blocks and you have the brain boosters, right? And I'll talk more about that. But what I can tell you today in my own journey, what has been amazing for me and continues to be amazing, you know, and I have this happen in my practice a lot. I have a high ACE score. Adverse childhood experiences is a way to look at the trauma histories. I have a high ACE score, right? The higher your ACE score, the more likely you will be that in your 40s and 50s, you will develop some sort of metabolic issue. You will develop an autoimmune disorder. You're more at risk for developing cancer, hypertension, high blood sugar, all these things, because those early traumas trigger your immune system, your nervous system to be in fight, flight, freeze from a very early age. So you're just bathed in too much cortisol. It just changes your brain, right? So because of that, I was predisposed to a number of things, right? And that's one of those, so we're clear, that's one of those brain blockers, okay? That is one of those brain blockers. Do you have a high score, right? Did you have big T trauma in your childhood? And that's a little bit more advanced. I have clients that come to me for brain optimized intensives or safe and sound protocol intensives. And if they have done my basics, we'll often go into a more advanced intensive where we're looking at those adverse childhood experiences, those traumas, big T traumas, and working on rewiring, remodeling the nervous system, because it's been wired for so long for stress and drama and chaos, right? So that has to be addressed. That's a brain blocker. That's over there with that nervous system, so the neurological, and that's on that psychological leg, and you have to work with those. I tended, when I was very young, to have a great deal of fungal overgrowths and candida infections. And I had strep all the time. Oh my gosh. And I was on all the penicillin, right? These are brain blockers. That's microbiome that is off track, all right? That has to be boosted, right? So we've got to get rid of the thing. So we got to get rid of the thing that's blocking you. So we had to get rid of those infections. Then we have to boost the microbiome. So we need good bacteria. And then we have to go in and figure out if there's been any impact to the system from all those infections, right? And then how do we repair that? What does that repair process look like, right? And I'll talk even more about this on May 12th, but in my own journey, that is a lot of what I had to do. I had to deal with the infections. I had to deal with the fact that I was chronically on antibiotics from a very early age. And then I had to figure out, well, how do I repair my gut? How do I repair my immune system from all those things that I did that I wasn't even aware that I wasn't supposed to be doing, because that's the Western model approach, right? No one did anything bad in doing that, right? I have no blame for anyone in my childhood, but that's what we do. We do all these medications, and we do traditional treatments. And then when we put a child or an adult on a ton of antibiotics, we don't go back and rebuild the microbiome. We don't go back and fix the gut. We don't go back and see, well, now is that person sensitive to foods, which I ended up having tons of food sensitivities. Unbeknownst to me, all of these things changed my capacity to deal with my environment and fed into mental health struggles. These things made it so that I was more depressed, I was more anxious, I had focus issues, because the microbiome and these infections impact the brain, impact the gut, right? So there's these connections, right? So just case study number one, me as my first case study, my journey with mental health included looking at those things. The other piece I had to really look at, and is part of my treatment protocol with my current practice, is movement. I am shocked how many people don't exercise and then are surprised that they are depressed and anxious. You can't not exercise. Okay? That's just not an option. I need you to understand. I can't get into it in this already very long live and podcast recording, but you can't be inactive. You must exercise. You must exercise 5 days a week, and you must make a commitment to yourself to do so 20 to 30 minutes. Everything you need to tap into to help you work through and resolve some of the mental health and brain health struggles is inside of you and can be activated with exercise, right? Now, someone who, like I said earlier, dealt with depression, dealt with anxiety, dealt with suicidal ideation, I am not saying to you that people are struggling with mental health because they refuse to exercise. That is an oversimplistic explanation of my model. That is part of my model, that you must be exercising to save your brain. And if you save your brain, you will improve your mental health, right? You will improve your mental health when you save your brain. So then you need to do things that boost your brain. And one of the things I was doing when I was younger was just not being active enough. And that's why I became because I just couldn't believe how much better I felt once I exercised. And so that's why I became such an advocate for movement, because I could not resolve what was going on inside of me without movement. And then I went on to talk more and more about diet. Oh my gosh, because when I eliminated the foods that I was sensitive to, the skies parted and I just felt so amazing. And who knew I was sensitive to all these foods? I just loved mac and cheese and all the dairy and all the gluten and all the things. I am a Southern girl. I grew up very normal. My mother believed everything should be fried. I loved biscuits and honey and donuts and cake. Like, I did all those things. And do you know, I was depressed, in my bed, unable to work, because of the things I just described to you, right? So then I turned away 15 years ago and went gluten-free, because that saved my brain, which saved my mental health, which kept me on this earth. Because remember, patient one, client one, had a tendency from a very early age, at age 11, to be anxious, depressed, and struggled with suicidal ideation, right? So I'm proposing these things from my perspective, and then I have attracted so many people in my own practice who are like, I really just don't want to live on medications. I do not want to have to move in with my talk therapist, and I think there is something wrong. Now, I said, and I'll start to close here, I said that I had a high ACE score, which is that adverse childhood experiences, big T trauma in my childhood. It changes the way that your body works, right? And then I also had predisposition genetically for cancer in my family. My grandfather had cancer. My mother had cancer early on at 40 years old. Something goes wrong in my family with detox pathways, with antioxidants. Something goes wrong. So part of my journey later on, as I developed almost on schedule an autoimmune disorder, was that I wasn't detoxing toxins. So when you see me post about brain blocker toxins, right? That was part of my journey. And not being able to detoxify toxins is very inflammatory, right? If I could just talk more about toxins, I will just talk about toxins at some point, but it predisposes the brain to lots of inflammation. An inflamed brain is a very unfocused, foggy brain. It's a moody brain. It's a brain that will hurt itself, right? So part of my journey and part of what I unknowingly tapped into with all of the exercise and eating all those green vegetables and cruciferous vegetables, all that broccoli, all that cabbage, part of my issue was that I wasn't detoxing. And part of what I got when I started exercising and sweating and eating a cleaner diet was I supported detox pathways. Later on, as I got into functional medicine and became a naturopathic doctor, I actually started running tox screens, and it's something I do to this day. I test for mycotoxins, I test for environmental toxins, BPA, plastics, you name it, toxins from glyphosate and pesticides and herbicides. I test for all these things, the mycotoxins, all of them. I test for these things to see if the person in front of me who is struggling with their mood issue, who is struggling with autoimmunity, maybe they're struggling with inflammation because they're not detoxing properly. So when I talk about this three-leg approach, right, of physiological, psychological, neurological, to mental health, to brain health, I'm doing it from this very passionate place of having saved my own life with lots of help and lots of education, and having created this model, and then having attracted so many people, which is such a blessing, to my practice, specifically over the last 3 to 4 years, who wanted the same thing, who felt like something was wrong. They had exhausted Western medicine. They couldn't figure out why they weren't getting better as they were promised, and they suspected something deeper was going on, and they wanted me to find that root cause explanation to healing and to look at all those things. That is why I created the model that I created, and that is what I am talking about when I'm talking about these brain blockers and these brain boosters, okay? So if you can join me on May 12th at 12:30 to, I think, 1:45, it will be on Zoom. Registration will be underneath this video, underneath this podcast. I would love it if you could join me. There will be even more specific information about this, and then a way for you to kind of workshop what's going on with you. I wanted to have, one, an explanation, something that provided clarity, but also two, a way to kind of bring you up to speed on what I'm even talking about before you joined that workshop, okay? And yeah, that's what we're doing, okay? I don't see any questions at the moment. If there are any, please let me know. Let me check. I think we're okay here. I don't see anything I need to answer. I'm going to start to close this out. I am so grateful for your time, your attention today. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope you got something out of this. And as you continue to follow me on social and in email, and you're listening to the podcast, you now have an understanding of why I do what I do, why I have so much conviction. I'm still here. I'm still with us. My brain works really well. So I hope that gives you some hope as well. But as long as I am here with the gifts that I have, I will do this work. And I want you to glean as much as you can and what I post and share, even if we do not connect individually. And the workshop on the 12th is free. So all you have to do is sign up. If you're on Instagram, I'm also going live on Instagram. You can get that address to register in Linktree, in my link, okay? All right. I appreciate your time and attention on the podcast. Thank you so much. I so appreciate you. I'm closing out. Until next time, I hope you are well. And let me do that. Okay, and I'm closing out online. You have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday.